After his sermon, Cain prophesied to about 10 individuals or couples. Each of the messages was laced with bits of personal data, first names, cities, or street numbers. To one pastor and his wife, he mentioned the number 4001. Their church office was located on 4001 Newberry Road. He predicted that they would experience great revival in their Florida city. At another point, Cain asked if Mark and Debbie from Washington, D.C. were in the audience. This couple had been the pastors of a church in Washington for several years with a ministry office located at 139 C Street near the U.S. Capitol. Cain said, "There's something about 139 C, and he proceeded to predict that spiritual revival would someday impact Capitol Hill. Most people left the meeting astounded at the remarkable demonstration of the word of knowledge in Paul Cain's prophecies. It seemed that Cain had literally read these people's mail by recounting personal information he could not have known about total strangers. It disturbed me that almost everyone who received these prophetic directives was part of the full-time staff of the ministry sponsoring the conference. It also seemed puzzling that all the information Cain had ostensibly received from God was printed in a staff directory with addresses that I knew was easily available to conference speakers. Surely Paul Cain would not have studied the staff directory prior to the meeting, then recalled the names and numbers to make us think he had words of knowledge. A year later, my questions resurfaced. If this man were a true prophet from God, most of his prophecies would be coming true. I began to conduct my own research. I discovered most of the personal messages Cain had conveyed in San Antonio had fallen to the ground. The church on 4001 Newberry Road, for example, had closed, and most of the members had left the city, including the pastor and his wife. Mark and Debbie had resigned their pastoral positions in Washington, D.C. The 139 C Street office was rented out to another group. The church had moved to the suburbs. Another young man, who had been told by Cain that he would orchestrate a fruitful ministry in Southern California, told me he had moved to Texas, and had no desire to live in California ever again. A year after the San Antonio meeting, I interviewed Paul Cain again. He insisted during our conversation that no one has ever proved that he obtains information from any source other than God. 2 years later, I asked him to explain what had happened. I also asked him if he had seen any information about those people's street locations before he prophesied over them. He would not answer my questions directly, but through a friend denied any wrongdoing. Most of what he prophesied was inaccurate, so I have reached a conclusion. We are treading on dangerous ground if we build our lives naively on the words of any man who claims to speak for God. J. Lee Grady, What Happened to the Fire? 1994, pages 115 to 116.